Now let's get into the operation of the machine. So before we get started, first thing we need to do is make sure we have operational fire extinguishers that are in our area. After we've identified that those fire extinguishers are there, dates are still valid, we need to go and check our hoses on the back of the laser. So we need to make sure that we don't have any visible leaks in our water hose here. We need to follow that down over to the cooling system. We need to make sure we listen to hear if we hear any hissing of air, and make sure all of our cables look intact. We need to make sure our ventilation is connected, and then we can come around back to the front of the laser. And we can turn on our subsystem, which is a power switch here. What that does is it turns on our cooling, it turns on our ventilation fan, it sends a power to our laser, and it turns on our air assist below. So once we've identified that we have no leaks, all of our subsystems are running, and we've checked that there's no electrical wear, no cables that are stripped open, you'll retrieve the key from a lockbox. You'll take this key, you'll put it into the laser and turn it into the on position. If the laser does not turn on, you may need to check the emergency switch. Somebody may have pushed this in. You do give it a slight turn to the right and it pops back out, and you should see your laser turn on, which will indicate that it's booting up. Now, this laser sometimes will be stuck on the boot up screen. That's okay. Go ahead and hit the home button, and you'll see the laser move back to the right where it hits a proximity switch, and then it's going to move all the way to the back of the machine where it's going to hit another proximity switch. And this identifies its 0 point and the start of the machine. Once that has been done, you can open up the lid and then identify which bed you want to use. Now we have two types of beds. We have a knife bed that is for probably 90% of the cuts that you'll be doing. You typically want your material to not be touching a surface as much as you can. So a knife bed's good because you have reduced surface to surface touching. But this doesn't always work for all cases. If you're cutting paper, sometimes that paper will fold down and not sit straight, or you're cutting small material, it's going to fall through the knife bed. If that's the case, we also have the honeycomb bed over here that you can use, which as you can see, it has a tighter surface, so you can fit on smaller pieces or paper. So once you've selected your bed of choice, you'll take this bed and carefully tilt the back down. Make sure you don't hit the laser head up here, and lay it down. When you're laying this bed down, there's a few things you want to check. You want to make sure you're not pushing the lips of the knife bed underneath the edge, because as you bring up the bed, you're going to get a pinch here, or as you're bringing it down, you might grab the top of it and lift it up. So when you place this down, you want to make sure it's nice and square onto this table, and your bed is in place. Once you have your bed in place, you're going to identify the material that you want to cut. In this case, we're going to be using acrylic. We take our acrylic, we're going to place it down onto the bed. And as I stated, we wanted a bed that doesn't touch the material. And as you see, when this cuts, the laser will go over top of this blade here, and you'll see a little spark. And that's just because it's touching that, which gives a flashback that may give you a slight crack in the acrylic. So if we can reduce the amount of surface that touches your material, the better. So I placed the material down. Once I have the material in here, I'm going to go over to the control panel. I'm going to page over to Fast XY, and we hit the left arrow, and as you see, we're moving the head of the laser. And I want to put this red dot indicator, which is a little tough to see on acrylic, and if you get a piece of paper, sometimes you'll be able to see that here. We want to make sure that this laser is slightly over, so I'm going to move the head of the laser a little bit more. And now, as you can see, the laser's jumping big gaps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the next page that says slow XY, which will slowly move the laser head. And I can have finer adjustments. Once I figure out where I have the laser and it's in the right spot, the next thing I need to do is verify the height. So this is our red lens. You'll hear us reference the red lens, the blue lens, or the yellow lens. The red lens here is a 2.5-inch focal length, and we have a measuring tool for that. The red lens is good for engraving materials or even cutting semi-thick materials. Our blue lens is really good for engraving fine details, but not necessarily good for cutting thicker materials. And then our yellow lens is for cutting thick materials, but not necessarily engraving materials. So in this case, you'll always see our red lens on our machine. If you ever replace the lens and put in a blue or yellow, you should always put the red back in its place. So now that we have the red lens in, we want to take this measuring tool, the focus lens tool, and put it on the shoulder. And as you can see, I can't set the focus tool on the shoulder of the lens. And so what I need to do is lower the bed. So I'm going to hold this here with my left hand, reach over with my right hand, and I can go to slow Z. And I'm going to slowly lower this bed until I have the focus lens touching the shoulder and touching the material. So I want these both to be touching at the same time. Now, once I have that, I know that this lens is 2.5 inches away from my material in its prime focus point. So as the invisible IR beam comes through these mirrors, it hits a lens in here and it focuses down into a fine point.
The lens focuses the power of the laser beam down into a single point. If you've ever used a magnifying glass in the sun to burn holes in things as a kid, it's exactly the same principle. The distance between the lens and the focus point is called the focal length. Now, the further away from the focus point something is, the less power is going to be hitting it. So if we're trying to cut something reasonably thin, say like 1/4 inch or 6mm material, most of the laser's power can be focused into that. If we try to do a thicker material, say 12mm or 1/2 inch, a lot of that thickness is going to be out of focus, so the laser is going to struggle more to cut through.
Once you have the machine set up, it's focused, it's positioned, so the first thing we're going to do is open up our image that we want to cut and etch. Here, in this example, we're going to be doing a triangle keychain that has a cutout with a center hole, and then we're going to etch Make717 on this. So I open this file up in as a PDF. I'm also going to go into I'm also going to go and click this blue triangle down here for Retina Engrave to open up the program. Once the program's open, you can see there's no image. We'll go back to our PDF. We'll go File, Print. We'll select Full Spectrum Engineering Driver. We're going to make sure that selection is for actual size, and then our image is somewhere fitting in this screen. I'm going to hit Print. What's going to happen is that image is now going to load into the Retina Engrave software. Once the image is loaded into Retina Engrave, you'll see a few things. We have our Raster Engrave tab, which what this is going to do is going to scratch the image onto your material. Either it's wood, it's going to burn that image into it, or it's going to burn, melt away a little bit of the acrylic, or you may even etch into stone. So that's what the raster will do. And the other tab that we have is Vector Cut. It's going to cut the material. So you'll either cut the paper, you'll cut acrylic, you'll cut wood, but you can't cut things like stone or metal. So now what we're going to do is we're going to first set up our raster engrave. So a few things that I want to do is we have this circle here and this triangle. We don't need to etch that into the image because those are cut pads. So the first thing I want to do is lower my black and white threshold over here in my control panel. This control panel here on the right hand side is always open. It is broken into a couple different sections. You can control the laser, move the laser head with the controls up here. What we have here is our raster properties, which refers to this tab of etching in the image. and then we have our vector layers of how we're going to cut this material out. So the first thing we want to focus on, as I said, is the raster. So we want to lower this black and white threshold, which is going to take out anything that's not black. The lower that you drag, we take this to about 71 here. You can see now that the circle and the triangle are gone from that image. Then what we want to do is identify what we're etching. So we're going to be etching acrylic. We have these quick sheets here that kind of give you a reference guide of different materials that people have used here. Here you'll find acrylic, an engrave. We have a power setting of 10 and a speed of 100. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our raster power here, and we're going to set this into 10. You can either drag this down, or you can type in 10 and click off, and you'll see that slider jumps down to 10. Now speed is 100, so we're going to leave this at 100 full speed. The next thing we want to do is set up our vector. So we go over to our vector tab. You'll see that we have a red circle and a green triangle. And when you're cutting your vectors, you always want to cut from the inside out. So if let's say we're cutting 3 circles, you always want to cut your first circle inside, then your middle circle, and then your outer circle. And the reason for that is if you cut your outer circle and it falls, you're no longer going to be able to cut your inner circles. So as long as you cut your inner circle, that falls, your middle circle, that falls, then your outer circle, that falls. So that's how we want to always pay attention. So in this case, we want to cut out the circle for the key ring first. So we're going to go over to our vector layers in our control panel, and we're going to find the red vector line, and we're going to make sure that the order here is set to 1. So this is going to be the first thing cut. The next thing we want to do is, what is acrylic cut at? So we go back to our sheet, and we see acrylic has a power of 60 and a speed of 30. So I'm going to go ahead and set my power to 60 and my speed to 30. The second thing we want to do is cut out our triangle. So our second layer is green. We also want to cut that out at a speed of 30 and a power of 60. You'll also see black here. Black doesn't show up on this particular vector, so we want to make sure that that pass is turned off. We have 0 passes. We do not want to cut anything out that is black in here. The only things that we're cutting out is red and green. So once you have everything set up, we want to hit our job perimeter, make sure that our laser is not overlapping any pre-cut spots that we're actually going to be cutting and engraving where we want to on our material. So once we've verified that, so checklist, our subsystems are turned on, we've positioned our material, we positioned the laser head, we focused the laser, we loaded in our object into Retina Engrave, we set up its raster power and speed to know how deep we're going to cut it or etch into the material, and then we set up our vector to cut through the material and in what order. So once we have that checklist done, we're going to go ahead and hit play. Before we hit start job, we want to grab this clipboard, and you'll see on here there's a date, there's a job, an operator, engrave, cut, start, stop, and total time. You want to put in today's date, what type of job you're doing. We're going to be cutting acrylic, so I'm just going to put acrylic. The operator. What we're going to do, we're going to engrave and we're going to cut, and our start time. So this play button here is start job.
1, 2, 3. I was born up in the mountains, raised up in a desert town.
So once your raster is finished, you want to go over to your vector cut. Make sure that we're in vector mode. we're going to go ahead and hit the start job.
Oh, shining door, I long to see it. Hey, hey, you rolling river. Oh, shining door, long to see it.
So now that our job is done, we can open up the lid. We can move out our material. Work to get our piece out. And as I stated before, you know how I was talking about the inner circles, one falling down. As you can see, if I would have cut out the outside triangle first before I cut the circle, this object would have fell down through the grid and you wouldn't have never been able to get that cut. So that's why the order of layers are important. But now that we have our final piece down, you can wipe off any residue, you can clean this up. Once you have this done, put this to the side, take your material out, put your material away. You want to come over, grab a paper towel, get some alcohol on your paper towel. What we're going to do is do a wipe down. We want to wipe down the knife edges of where we used doing the cuts. We want to carefully take out the bed, put the bed back to its original position, the storage area. We want to make sure we hit the home button to home the machine, to put the laser back into its original position. We can pull out all of the excess pieces in the machine. Be careful of moving parts that you don't get pinched or cut. If you have a lot of excess pieces cut out, you can use this vacuum to clean out the vacuum. You can open up the front access panel here. You can vacuum out the inside underneath. As you can see, it probably needs a cleaning anyway. And then the same thing, there's an access panel on the back, or a pass-through panel that you can also vacuum out. When cleaning out or vacuuming, just be careful to stay away from any of the components. Do not hit electrical, do not touch belts, wipe down on what you've done. We don't want you to wipe down rails. We don't want you to wipe down other surfaces like belts. Stay away from those and stay away from any wiping of mirrors or lenses. The other thing you want to do is wipe this bed down, the aluminum bed. And then you want to take this towel and wipe off the head of the nozzle. Once the laser's homed, you can turn off the power. You can turn off the subsystems. Always close the lid. Put the key back in its lockbox. Close it up. And you're done. Although I forgot one thing. Once the job is finished, we're going to look at the time, put in our finish time, our stop time. What is our total minutes that we ran? And that's it.